Welcome back to the show. The experts are here to answer your questions about what's happening in the property market. So give us a call on 1300 30 34 35. Now, we've been talking about obviously kind of buying space, renting space, fitting out space. What if you haven't got that kind of cash? What are some of the alternatives out there if you're not full of cash at the moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, if I was starting my own business and I was working from home and I was thinking, oh, what do I need to do? I can't carry on working from home. There's a couple of options. Firstly is to approach a serviced office provider on a virtual office basis, and that way basically they answer your phone. You can use their address on your business cards. It gives you a presence but without actually renting an office, and the costs are pretty low if you just want to sort of dip your toe in the water and get into the market, and normally they're in fairly high profile buildings, so it can give your business quite a lift early on.
So virtual is where you basically get the address, the phone numbers, the rest of it, but you're not physically located in there.
Yeah.
And then the service bit is when you've actually got a physical bit of space.
Yeah, serviced is when you've actually got a regular office within the space that you rent from them. Normally on a short-term basis. They like to probably get you in for a year, but you can probably negotiate month to month. Again, in the prestigious buildings within the city, but they're packaged up pretty well. I mean, I've done it myself, and I think it has a time and a place. The costs are fairly high in terms of a small business, but in terms of having a base, access to meeting rooms, which is important, that you can pre-book, access to lunch facilities and kitchens to make a cup of coffee and a tea, and also your business name on the signage board. It can all be quite impressive and a good stepping stone, I think, for a business.
And actually, we'll pull up a graphic on the screen of some of the advantages of serviced offices. So, as you say, this probably isn't great news for Andrew, but obviously you don't need any office fit-out, do you?
Well, actually, it's the reverse of that. The tenants that occupy serviced office space are often great breeding grounds for us, because they're often new companies, young companies that are growing quickly. So, they then go and take a commercial lease somewhere else. So they become small work for us.
You can go and target them.
Absolutely, but also some of the big corporates would, typically rent a lot of serviced office space for a major project, or if there's a major infrastructure project for a company, they may put 100 people into that serviced office space. So all of a sudden you may get some connections with companies like that.
And what's interesting, Chris, I think it's worth pointing out that those big corporates that are probably not in Australia, that are overseas, that are looking to start businesses in Australia, very often they go into serviced offices just to sort of see how the business is going, and they're normally in for a year or two, get the staff, get the business running, and then they expand. So it's often see a lot of big internationals going into those environments.
Because you can literally just turn up and start. There's a phone there, there's secretaries there, all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, they're ready to go, sort of plug and play. You just turn up and you're away. Your internet access is there, your phone access is there, so your business can physically start from day one.
And also important to say that you end up in a location that you probably wouldn't be able to afford if you were taking the lease yourself. So some of these serviced offices are in very, very expensive real estate.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of, you mentioned one of the big disadvantages was obviously the cost of that. How much would it, if you can, equate to a square metre, if that's the way to do it, compared to renting it over 5 years or so?
Well, look, in the big buildings in the CBD, in a serviced office, you're probably looking at paying almost the equivalent as taking a lease in that building. Obviously, you're probably not going to get the same deal, but probably upwards of $1,000 a square metre. But obviously, they're built into that cost, all the support staff and all the electrics. So it's a total cost, but it's almost not worth actually working that figure out if you're thinking about it, because you look at it, and if you do make the comparison with a regular office, you can't equate the two, unfortunately. The office is probably the next step after that serviced office that you've been in, but if you need the serviced office, I think they're good tools to get started.
So if you're kind of testing the business out, if it's a new thing, you're not sure how quickly you're going to expand?
Absolutely, but I think also, and I've learned a lesson here because I've done it, you can still negotiate those short-term leases within serviced offices, and if there's any serviced office operators watching, they're probably going to wince, but you can do it, and even in a small way, negotiate yourself another desk, some meeting room tables in your room, some extra furniture, some free meeting room use, anything just so that you get a little bit of a win under your belt.
And is there much of a stigma, I guess, around the serviced office to say, well, you're not really a proper business, you're a kind of a bit of a start-up, or is it just seen as these days, well, people are going virtual, you don't have to be sitting. I mean, I live on the harbour, and so I look at the harbour every day rather than commute to the city. Is it just a different way that people work these days?
Yeah, look, I think it's accepted. You know, I think the virtual is very clever, and you could be anywhere. But I mean, it's the same as you having your BlackBerry with you. You could work from anywhere. So I think in terms of the stigma, I'd say no, there's no stigma. I think people understand that small businesses either don't need to grow to expand into lease space, and some stay quite small. And for sole traders or people with 1 or 2 people within the business, it works really well. You know, but I just think you just need to manage the costs.
Because I guess for some people as well is rather than getting the whole cost of organising a secretary and paying 40 or 50 grand for staff, to be able to pay them by the hour or pay them per thing that they do,
yep,
must be quite an advantage as well.
Look, I think it is. I mean, my experience, I don't know whether yours is the same, Andrew, because we've both been in service offices, but mine was those add-on secretarial services. I don't think that many people use, because most people are proficient themselves and are fairly standalone with printers, and a lot of stuff is sent electronically these days. So, you know, it's good to have that support staff, but you know, I'd question paying a huge amount for it. I don't know whether that's your same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the general rule of thumb with service offices is if you go to the toilet, you've got to pay for it. So
that's right.
you've really got to be careful in what additional things you're asking for in the service office.
And what are some of the other things? Like, can you take shorter leases than taking a 3 or a 5 year? Are they kind of like things like service rentals, like when you go on holiday, rather than going in a hotel, you go for a bit of an in-between? Do they have those kind of things?
Definitely. Look, 6 months to 12 months are pretty common, and then month to month if you want the flexibility. And you know, you don't have to have that huge commitment of signing for a 3-year term. And the other good thing with serviced offices is that you can grow within the same office environment. You know, if you're 2 people and you're going to be 4, you can take an office on the same floor around the corner, keep your same number, keep the same staff, same building. So companies do grow within the environment of a serviced office. There obviously comes a point where it becomes uneconomic to stay and worthwhile moving to an office. And when you move to that next office, that's when you can still go for perhaps a shorter term lease. You don't have to immediately go for a 5-year lease.
And is there much of a market for sharing? So obviously a lot of people go and buy their own unit in residential, let it out to a mate or put an advert in the paper, and obviously there's quite a few ads out there. Same thing in commercial space?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know quite a few people. I've done it myself again, where you can move into a friendly office that someone's probably got a spare office or a spare workstation, and that's often a good way to go because you get to use their meeting room space and low cost. The only thing I'd be careful there is just on the legality of working within that environment. It's all very nice when people are working happily together and we're all friends and maybe sharing business, but things do go wrong sometimes, and you just need to be careful you're not
so have some kind of lease or some kind of agreement between you?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously some formal subleasings within offices do require formal subleases and approvals, but informal arrangements where you're popping in once or twice a week, probably get away with.
Sure. Last couple of minutes on the show. Andrew, quick couple of tips from you. Doing your office fit out, what to be aware of?
Well, I think making sure you set your budget very early on and you guide your design team in the right way to that budget. That's probably the key to getting the budget result that you want. Timing is quite important as well. You need to be aware that, you know, if you're fitting out a space, you could be up for a 4 to 6 week fit out period with maybe a 2 or 3 week design period before that. So there's a 2-month period there, and if you couple that with the lease negotiations we talked about earlier, you know, there's a potential of quite a long period there. So you've really got to be planning ahead. Sure.
And Rob, quick couple of tips on negotiating leases and trying to get the best deal.
Look, obviously I'm going to say get some advice because that's my business. So get some advice. But I think don't be afraid to ask. I think. Even if you do want to do it yourself, you know, you have to negotiate hard. The landlords are there with a team of researchers, a team of analysts. You need to understand that they're not your friend necessarily. They're going to do the best deal for them. You need to make sure that you get the right advice and negotiate hard, because you know, if it is a 5-year commitment, it's a lot of money. Leases are very tight in terms of exiting and reducing liabilities, so you need to make sure that you go in with your eyes wide open. I think that's my best advice.
Sounds good. Rob Morris from Space Consulting, Andrew Holder from TDA Interiors, thank you very much for coming along this evening.
Thanks.
So, similar advice that we get a lot of weeks is obviously it's well worth paying for professional advice. Sometimes you've got to spend money to make money. Anyway, I hope that gave you a good insight into commercial property and whether you should be buying, renting or fitting out or doing whatever else you want to do.